Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Open to Life podcast. This is episode 19, and today I am with Felipe Avila, a awesome pro-life activist, fellow Mexican-American, and the director of the National Association of Pro-Life Nurses. Welcome, Felipe. Woo, 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 woo.
Thank you for having me.
Yay! Thanks for coming on. So, Felipe, let's just get started. Can you tell us about your journey into nursing and how your pro-life convictions have shaped or intersected with that path?
Yeah, so I have a really interesting, background that led me into this movement, this ministry. It's not uncommon, but I used to be radically pro-choice to the point where I saw abortion almost as necessary, not just a
I
form
did
of health.
not know that about you. That is so
Yeah,
interesting to me.
yeah,
Context.
not a lot of,
Yeah, I
uh-huh.
gotta give context. I've known you, or we've kind of known of each other. We've like crossed paths throughout several years in the pro-life movement. I guess I first met you when you were still in high school, and I did
Yeah.
not know you were in high school. I assumed you were in college like me at the time. Anyway, so I've known Felipe for a minute. Go on, go on.
Yeah. No, so yeah, full circle moment. I feel like I've been in college forever now, but basically back in early high school, my sophomore year, I just started to research and really look into the abortion issue. And, I at that time I was adamantly pro-choice, but I felt that if I was going to be able to defend the pro-choice position, I should understand the opposition and its the arguments that come with it. And so for me, at least, I did some research, listened to people like Lila Rose, Kristen Hawkins, and I actually found myself agreeing a lot more with them than I did with the pro-choice position, which I thought was odd. And so it wasn't like an overnight conversion. It was something that took about, a year, but it was definitely a learning experience for me. And that journey has really, it continues to drive and motivate the work that I do today. But to your question, I had a pharmacy tech background in high school, and so I had always had an interest or passion for healthcare. I grew up watching shows like Grey's Anatomy, and so for me, I was like, I really want to be a pro-life activist, but I also want to have a quote unquote stable career, right? And
Right.
obviously at the time I didn't know that you could do both. And so going to college where I am now in DC, I've really been able to lean into the nursing aspect of what I do, but also continue my pro-life work. And so that's kind of culminated now in what I do with Nurses for Life. So all of our communications efforts, I work with nurses, nurse practitioners, we mobilize them. And so I guess, to summarize, like what I've learned is that, you can still be a professional, you can still have a career, and you can still be a pro-life activist. You don't have to pick one or the other. And I think that's the beauty of the pro-life movement.
Very cool. So I did not know that you were pro-abortion at one time. Very
Yeah.
cool that you came to the pro-life side, to be on the right side of history.
Uh-huh.
So tell us a little bit of what drew you into pro-life activism specifically. Was there a particular moment or influence that lit you on fire?
Yeah, you know what? I think it really was, again, as a person who believes in science, and biology, I just found that there were a lot of inconsistency in the abortion rights narrative. And there's that study that was done that over 97% of biologists affirm that human life begins at conception. And so I think that really was where it started to click. The gears started turning. And for me, at least, I came to see abortion for what it is, which is murder. And as someone who was in healthcare at the time, continues to work in healthcare, it made me uncomfortable and I wanted to do something. That led me to Students for Life. In high school, I started a Students for Life chapter, and that kicked off the fight for me because it wasn't, a lot of the work I do now is at a national level, but it started local for me. It started at the school level and it slowly grew. And I don't know if you knew this, but I actually ended up suing my school district for viewpoint
I
discrimination.
remember that now that you mention
Yeah.
it.
So that was a lawsuit that we ended up winning, and that was I think the first time that I felt that even as a student then, we have so much power, we have so much capability to actually effectuate change. And I think that that mindset has continued to follow me since then.
Wow. So you sued your high school for the right to start a pro-life group?
So essentially, they approved us. They were very sneaky. So you might, I mean, you're familiar with Angelique Clark. She started another one at a sister school, but she had to fight to get it approved. So we were a little bit more fortunate. We got approval, but they were more sneaky because they wouldn't approve certain flyers. They would say that certain terms were controversial. So in essence, they would allow the abortion feminist club to promote their meetings, but we couldn't promote our meetings. And so
Oh my
they were
goodness.
essentially saying you can exist, but also not really. You're not allowed to exist.
But don't tell others that you exist. Don't try to get other people to join your group.
Right.
Dang, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. So then how did your time throughout your Students for Life years form or shape your approach to advocacy?
Yeah. So, like I said, I think, unfortunately, I think society has a very narrow view of students a lot of times. But if you look to history, a lot of times it's students, it's the young people that are, again, effectuating that change, that are
Yeah.
you know, creating lasting impact. And so my experience with Students for Life, we have what we call fellowships. And so I did a couple. I was a policy fellow at one, and I was able to do some lobbying here in my state, Nevada. And again, you start to look at these different aspects of how the government works, how our society works, how we can change the culture. And then once you acquire that knowledge, you're able to then use it as a tool to reach our goal, which is making abortion unthinkable and illegal.
You just reminded me of the White Rose movement, the White Rose Resistance, a nonviolent German resistance group during World War II who fought against the Nazis and tried to shed light on that nonviolently. And I'm just thinking of Sophie Scholl and just this like idea of students dropping flyers on their campus and really like students can be very powerful if we are brave and
Exactly.
utilize that time while in college. I feel like there's something about being a student when you're lobbying or working with professionals. There's like this level of almost innocence, I feel like, for lack of a better term, of like, they're just students and these students want XYZ, if that makes sense. But yeah,
Yeah.
I also got started in the pro-life movement through Students for Life, which is how we crossed paths throughout the years. And I definitely feel like my time learning through their guidance and mentorship helped to shape me into the activist I am today. And just this past weekend, actually, I got invited to speak virtually to this like day long summer conference to some college students. And I was
Yeah.
just
Wow.
encouraging them, like, y'all, the things I learned while with SFLA, like, I use so many of those skills in the present day. So, anyways, props to you. Shout out to all my
Oh
fellow
yeah. I mean,
SFLA
are you?
alumni.
Yeah. Are you a millennial or Gen Z?
I never know where I land. I feel like I don't fit in with either group. I feel like I'm a Gen Zillennial. Like there's things where I'm
There you
like,
go.
haha, I fit
Yeah.
in, or haha, I fit in over there. And I don't know. Part of it's probably also that I'm not like really on TikTok. And maybe if I
Mm.
was, I'd be more of a Gen Zer. But anyways,
So that's okay. You can be an honorary Gen Z.
so I don't know where I
It counts. I think that's
land.
Gen.
Okay, so what does it mean to be a pro-life nurse in today's healthcare climate? Are there unique challenges or opportunities that you have to work through?
Yeah, so I'm a student nurse now, but I work very closely with a lot of our registered nurses or nurse
Mm,
practitioners.
mhm.
And I would definitely say that we've kind of started to see a shift in the culture when it comes to healthcare. I think a lot of people now are starting to finally call out, the unfortunately the perversion of what we now call healthcare. Before it used to be, first do no harm. That's the most basic tenet of being a provider. But again, unfortunately, we started to call things like, even assisted suicide, euthanasia, abortion. These are things that, 50 years ago, the American Medical Association, the Nurses Association would look at it and say that is obviously not healthcare. But I think again, we're starting to see very, out of state special interest groups that are coming in that are trying to lobby state legislatures. And what they're essentially doing is they're subverting or they're ignoring the will of the people. And unfortunately, like I said, I think that our nurses are starting to see a lot of pushback. But what we're doing at NEPN is trying to shift the tide, change the culture. So we're really active on platforms like TikTok. And obviously we get a lot of pushback, but we also spark a lot of conversations from young people, from nurses, from other providers. And I think that, when you start to push back like we are doing, we start to see results, which I think we have seen.
What does that pushback look like?
Yeah, I think honestly, it just starts with having these conversations, right? At the hospital, maybe even at the bedside.
Mm.
But really, until we're actually pushing back, the narrative is still going to be there that abortion is healthcare. But groups like APLOG, NAPN, they're doing incredible work because they're mobilizing thousands of nurses, providers, other clinicians, and all of a sudden the public, right? They're starting to see a very vocal group that is saying this isn't healthcare actually.
So I gotta tell you, Felipe, I had no idea that the National Association of Pro-Life Nurses was a thing, that they existed until you were started sharing about them online. Now, I don't know if that's thanks to you bringing NAPN into the modern day, but I had no idea that was a thing. Was it thanks to you reviving their social media? I have no idea.
Yeah, so we've been around, I want to say just as long as APLOG, so the pro-life
Oh.
OBGYNs. So we've been around since the 70s. But I think over the last couple of years, we've started to have kind of like a revitalizing effort, and we're trying to modernize, reach young people directly where they are, which is social media. And
Mm.
so we've seen a dramatic increase in membership over the last couple of years, and we
Wow.
continue to see that rise. So we're really excited about what the next couple of years has in store.
Very cool. Okay, so tell us about the work of NAPN. What's the mission? What do the people need to know? And how can we get involved?
Yeah. So essentially, what we do is, like I mentioned earlier, our biggest focus is on challenging the mainstream narrative that abortion is healthcare. And a lot of what we do is we represent our members. So our membership consists of our certified nursing assistants all the way up to our nurse practitioners, our clinicians. And so we don't just educate them, right? We provide them with information about, ways to get involved in this fight, but also, what abortion is, what euthanasia is, and the efforts to legalize it. But what we also do is we mobilize them. So once they're educated, we mobilize them, we bring them to the state legislatures, we do lobbying, and we've
Mhm.
seen a lot of results. And states like Nevada, New York, they've been pushing for years to legalize assisted suicide. And we've been able to work with other allied groups to make sure that doesn't happen. But at the core, kind of zooming out, our long-term focus has been on conscience protections, especially in states like California, where you are, Melanie. Some states have been trying to force healthcare workers to participate in abortion procedures or other procedures that violate their deeply held beliefs. And so that is something that we've also been very proactive about educating our members, but also mobilizing them to take action to stop it.
That's amazing. I know that is very important work. Haven't there been uh in recent years some Supreme Court cases about conscious rights protections? Am I getting
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So a lot of these cases have worked its way up to the Supreme Court because state lawmakers, right, who are radically pro-abortion, they have been trying for years, like I said, to force healthcare workers, nurses, other clinicians to participate in abortions, to participate in assisted suicide. And thankfully, right, the Supreme Court has rightfully upheld that healthcare workers have a conscience. They have a right to decline to participate in procedures or other activities that they believe would cause great harm to the patient or that go against their deeply held beliefs.
That's so crazy to me that that's, like, even a discussion. I feel like that should be a
Yeah,
given, like, "Oh, you don't feel comfortable doing that? Well, that's fine, like, no worries." Like, to me, that's just so crazy that's even a
I agree.
barrier.
Yeah. I agree.
Okay, so have you, I know you said you are a nursing student, a student
Mhm.
at the time, but have you encountered thus far any ethical dilemmas in the medical field where being pro-life made a difference in how you responded? Maybe to a colleague or to a patient? I don't know. Let's hear a story.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, we often think about the pro-life label as just being about like opposing abortion. But I think, especially in a healthcare setting, or context, it really is more of like a worldview. It's not just saying, oh, I don't like abortion, I don't like euthanasia. It's also saying, we respect the dignity of every patient from conception all the way to natural death throughout the lifespan. And so, to your question, I can think back earlier, this spring, I had a patient that they were in a lot of suffering, and they were an elderly patient. They were a veteran that served our country. And a lot of my classmates, it might have been easy for them to just ignore it. You feel the discomfort. You don't want to, get too close. But for me, the reason I'm pro life is because I see God's design in the preborn child, but I also see, the elderly as a design of God, as a child of God. And so for me at least, in that moment, I was able to, have some compassion for that patient, empathy. And I think at the most fundamental level, being a nurse requires compassion. It requires kindness. And so that's why, I just don't understand how any clinician, any nurse can be pro-abortion. It just doesn't make sense. I think it's fundamentally incompatible with what it means to be a healthcare worker if you can't respect your patients throughout the lifespan.
You just reminded me of a story I heard last month, actually. I was at the Notre Dame Vita Institute, which is this pro life week long intellectual formation program. Definitely
Mhm.
recommend
Yeah.
going and checking that off your pro life bucket list. And one of the speakers talked about assisted suicide, euthanasia, and she was sharing with me an encounter she had. She had just finished giving a talk to a Knights of Columbus group. And at the end of her talk, one of the gentlemen came to her and asked, "Do you really think there's never reason for euthanasia?" And her response was, "Who's on your heart right now? Like, who's coming to mind?" And he mentioned my wife, his wife. And she said, "Let's step away. Let's go to the chapel and let's take a moment to pray." And before they got into the pew, they genuflected. He had one of the things he mentioned to her before they went to pray is that sometimes he kisses his wife and maybe she kisses back, but he's not sure of how present she is. I believe the wife had dementia, and that her kissing back, what he felt maybe was almost just a reflex. And so they had genuflected, they're in the pew, and the words that came to her were something along the lines of, "Holy Spirit, just as we genuflect, sometimes we do it, maybe it's just a reflex, but
Yeah.
help us to remember that, Lord, you are truly present in the Eucharist, just as present as you were on Calvary, at Bethlehem. Help us to remember you are still truly there, even though sometimes we do things as if they are just a reflex." And the
Yeah.
husband then responded like, "Okay, I get the message. I got the point."
Yeah.
So, anyways, as you're talking, that story came to my mind of just that consistent life ethic that
Mhm.
even when it may feel like someone is not fully there, that they still are fully there, even just as Catholics, how we believe in the true presence of Jesus in the
Mhm.
Eucharist. It may not feel like seem like it with the eyes, but they are all still fully there. I kind of just made a connection into the
Yeah.
euthanasia discussion. Yeah, but you mentioned consistent life ethic,
Mhm.
and which I feel like all consistent life ethic people are pro-life, but not all pro-life people follow a consistent life ethic. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, if you
Yeah.
follow the consistent life ethic, default you're pro-life, but if you're pro-life, doesn't mean necessarily you follow a consistent life ethic. And I would say that I do follow a consistent life ethic. And so my question for you is, how can nurses and nurses to be, aspiring nurses, live out that consistent life ethic in environments that may not be supportive of their values?
Question. Yeah. Yeah. And I think I mean, it's such an important question, especially, in the current culture where, again, you have a lot of hospital systems that are doing abortions in network. But what I would say to them is it's a worldview. It's a framework with which you approach your nursing practice. Just like we have the nursing process, being pro-life is also how you view your patients. And again, at the most fundamental level, our work, being a healthcare worker, means respecting and upholding the dignity of every human life throughout the lifespan. So I would say, advocating for yourself first and foremost, but also advocating for your patients. And that could look like, if you're asked to do a procedure with which you do not feel comfortable doing, it violates your conscience rights, speak up, right? And also speak up for your patients if there are any circumstances or, scenarios where a provider is maybe suggesting, um, you know, euthanasia or some kind of immoral end of life care for a patient. You're not just a healthcare worker, you're also a patient advocate. And that is what separates us from a lot of other professions, I would say.
Okay, so switching gears a little, we're gonna get a little spicy now because now we're gonna talk about our Chicano Mexican American
Yeah.
heritage. Ay, viva la raza. Okay, so I want to hear from you if and how your cultural identity, your cultural background has informed your pro life work, your pro life mission.
Yeah, great question. So I'm a first generation American. I'm Mexican, so my parents migrated from Mexico. And I was born here in Las Vegas, Nevada. I've lived here my entire life. And it was, it's definitely something that has shaped who I am. And it really is, the first generation experience, not just for high school or college, but also, the work that we do in the pro-life movement. It's definitely impacted me. I would say, my parents never went to high school, so I was a first generation high school graduate. Next year, I'll be a first generation college graduate, and
That's
so
amazing. That's no
yeah.
small feat. I hope you're very proud of yourself.
Thank you. Yeah. And, what, we were discussing earlier, and I think for a lot of people who maybe don't have that shared experience or lived experience, it may be difficult for them to understand, but it is a struggle. And, I went into elementary school not knowing more than a sentence of English. And it was a language that I had to learn at a very young age. And obviously I'm very fluent, like very fluent now, but at the time it was definitely a struggle. But I think from a very early age, I learned what it means to be a hard worker. I learned what it means to advocate for yourself. And that continues again to drive the work that I do in the pro life movement because, in many ways, I see, the preborn, I see the defenseless, the people who are marginalized as someone that I should be there advocating for because, at the time when I was first generation, in many ways I had to advocate for myself. So,
Yeah.
it would have been nice to have other people there for me. And so I want to make sure that, as you said, consistent life ethic, not just for the preborn, but for other marginalized groups, that they have someone there for them. And so I think also, in many ways, my heritage, my culture, that's what drove me to go into healthcare.
Yeah, I feel like us pro-life Latinos, Mexican Americans are kind of few and far between. At least those of us who are like vocal online and trying
Mhm.
to get in front of media and have a presence, being the ones to pull up a chair, if there's not a chair for us at the table.
Exactly.
So, what would you say to other young fellow Latinos, Mexican Americans who are wrestling with the pro life message or looking for a place to plug into the movement?
Yeah, I mean, especially for young people, I would say abortion really is a social justice issue, even if a lot of people don't
Totally.
see it that way. And, for us, again, being first generation, I think my message would be don't be afraid to advocate for yourself, but also know that, there is a place for you within the pro-life movement. We are inclusive. And as you said, Melanie, there is a growing voice or movement within our movement that is exemplifying this consistent life ethic.
Hmm. Yeah, I really hope that more pro-life Latinos, Mexican Americans continue to rise up and use
Yeah.
their voices boldly. And I have no doubt that I'm sure just you and people like you and I just like existing,
Mhm.
just doing the pro-life thing, I'm sure
Yeah.
that's inspiring other people that we don't even know about because they see someone who looks like them, sounds like them, has a name like them, shared experience like them. I'm sure
Exactly.
other
Exactly.
people are getting inspired, motivated to get involved, and we'll never know.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great point too, because Gen Z especially, right? We, in many ways, we like to see authenticity in movements, in organizations, and people. And I
Mm,
think when you have people that you can relate your experience to, other Latinos, other first generation Americans, I think in many ways that elevates them as well. But also for the pro-life issue, especially, we need. I really do believe that we need to do a better job at reaching minority people, underserved communities. And
yes.
that starts with having people like us, people who look like us, people who speak like us involved in this line of work. Otherwise, if we're not a voice for these underserved communities, who will be?
Yeah, totally. Oh my gosh. Yes. Retweet, reshare, re-X. I don't know what it's called. I'm not really on Twitter. Totally. Yeah. I feel, yes, 1,000%. I really hope that in the national pro-life space that there will be more diversity of
Yeah.
voices being promoted, not because like, I don't know,
Yeah.
it's a hard
Not
line to balance because, like, you don't
yeah.
wanna have someone feel tokenized, but
Hmm.
then it's also a line of, like, "But we need to reach these people," because I totally agree with you.
Right.
People need to see people who look like them, sound like them, have familiar like, cultural backgrounds, experiences like them, and I think that
Hmm.
it's a line to balance, but also that people deserve to be on a national stage. Like I'm thinking of what's her name, Mayra Rodriguez, a
Hmm.
former Planned Parenthood clinic worker who sued Planned Parenthood and won. Put her on a national stage,
Right.
please, right now. I'm thinking of Monica Klein. She was a
Mm.
former Planned Parenthood sex education worker, also left that industry, and now she advocates for sexual risk
Yeah.
avoidance and for families to be the primary teachers about sex ed to their children. And like Monica Klein, put her on the stage, please. Not just because they're Latinos, but because they deserve it.
Right. I think it's so interesting to me because my message to the pro-life movement is we're never going to abolish abortion within our lifetime if we can't effectively reach every major group in this country, right? If we're
Mm,
only harping on, Caucasian Americans, that's not going to end abortion because we know that there are so many other social groups that are having abortions and there is no one there to reach them. Melanie, I can't tell you how many times when I've been outside the Supreme Court, I'm the only one who speaks Spanish on the pro life side. And I'm the only one that I've become like the designated go to for Telemundo, Univision, because I'm like, I kid you not, every single time they
yeah.
will be looking for someone that speaks Spanish. And there is no one. And then I have to, which is great. But I definitely agree. Like, I don't think it's about being tokenized. I think it's about making sure that we're serving and we're reaching the people that we owe our culture to, that we have a lived experience with, because again, if we don't, who will?
Yeah, totally. I hope as time goes on, there will be more diversity on national stages in the pro-life media. And yeah, I think that that's awesome. You're using your Spanish, you're being a voice, you're reaching that Spanish speaking audience. And wouldn't it be great if there were multiple Spanish speakers out there? And hey, you take Telemundo, I'll take Univision,
Exactly.
and we'll tag team.
What we need. It's what we need.
Yeah. Okay, so then do you see a growing movement of pro-life Latino professionals standing up for life in healthcare, education, or media like we're talking about?
Yeah, definitely. I would say, maybe this is controversial, but just by default, I think a lot of Hispanic, Latino people, they tend to be pretty conservative on a lot of social issues. But unfortunately, when it comes to politics, I think, it ties to my point earlier. We're not as effective as Planned Parenthood as we should be, right? And so Planned Parenthood is their messaging is really strong. They have a lot of Spanish speaking, spokespeople. And so I would definitely say that in the last 2, 3 years, we've started to see, I think, a growing cultural shift. We look at states like Florida, right? Florida, especially. Oh my gosh, it used to be pretty socially liberal, progressive. And, we saw in the last election cycle overwhelmingly that Floridians voted to reject a referendum that would have expanded abortion. And so, Florida is a lot of the people in the South are Latino, they're Chicanos. And I think that they're starting to wake up, but we need to do a better job of reaching out to them and saying, hey, you're not alone. There are people like you, like us. And it won't be until we start to mobilize them that we'll start to see results. But we hear all the time about this silent majority, right? And I think that's the case as well for Latinos, for Hispanic people. And I think Republicans are starting to capitalize on that. And I think that the pro-life movement should as well. We should recognize that, hey, actually, they're on our side. We just need to do something about it.
We gotta reach them. I feel like, what could that look like practically? I feel like maybe one way how that could look like is like bilingual brochures, bilingual literature, an option for toggling to Spanish on your websites. I just thought of that right now. But like,
Yeah.
wouldn't that be a really cool way? I think it'd be really cool to see like bilingual talks, bilingual webinars, or at least, or maybe like real life translation at the bottom, or I don't know, something at least where there's the
Yeah.
effort made to reach the Latino Spanish speaking peoples. Just an idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on the head. That's honestly, I would say like that is the bare minimum of what we should be doing, right? Making our websites accessible, making our social media accessible. But I think what I've started to see the pro-life movement and maybe even the Republican Party in general do is they've started to basically create these spaces that are Latino led, right? And so I think unfortunately the
You're
problem
right.
with the abortion movement, the Democratic Party, is a lot of what they do is they tokenize minority people, right? They don't, they're kind of giving them this platform with the idea of just tokenizing them and saying, oh, we have diversity, when in reality it is, some middle-aged white staffer that is organizing everything. When you look to the pro-life movement, you look to conservative circles, and you have organizations like Lexit, right, Latino Exit, that are starting to mobilize Latino people, Chicano people that look like them.
Hmm.
So this has to be, I guess the point is, this has to be, a lot of our efforts have to be led by people that look like us. So if we want to do outreach to Latino people, right, who knows best to reach Latino people than someone who is Latino?
Yeah,
Similarly, if we want to reach Black Americans in the pro-life conversation, I think that we should have input, we should have feedback from Black Americans
yeah.
who are involved in this.
You know, kind of related. There were so many times when I was on the sidewalk in San Antonio, Texas, that I used my Spanish. And there were sometimes that I was the only Spanish speaker out there. And if it
Mhm.
hadn't been that I knew how to communicate with a girl on the sidewalk, like, could we
Yeah.
have reached her? I think we did do a good job to have some bilingual brochures, so that was good. But my point being is, I feel like God can use anyone and everyone. And
Yeah.
I was able to reach a fellow Latina girl on the sidewalk because I could speak Spanish. And I know of a story from my good friend Mallory, shout out if you happen to be
That's
listening,
awesome.
who is Black American.
Yeah.
And I remember her sharing with me once, she was on the sidewalk. There were other sidewalk pro-lifers there too. But she's like, 10 out of 10, I know that car stopped to talk to me because they saw a fellow Black person, and that was the only reason why they stopped to talk to me. And yeah, so just wanting to echo that point of, it really resonates with people when they see, their kin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people who look like you, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
so switching gears a little to talk about integrating faith into your pro-life work. You are a fellow Catholic, like
I am.
myself. And actually, have you always been Catholic?
Yeah, born and raised.
Same, I know. Cradle Catholics, us Latinos, right? So, how does your faith help with sustaining your work in both nursing and pro life advocacy?
Yeah, yeah, like I said earlier. So I mean, I'm cradle Catholic, but I feel like before high school, really, it was more of, I'll say, token Catholic, right? I was just kind of Catholic, but I wasn't really, I didn't understand the tenets of the faith very well. And so I was pro-choice, right? I was a pro-choice
Yeah,
Catholic, like so
yeah,
many people are today. But it wasn't until I actually picked up the Bible, right? Like I said, started actually understanding what it means to live out the Catholic faith, that I embraced every teaching of the church. I will say, oddly enough, it wasn't necessarily my Catholic faith that drew me to the pro life movement. Like I said, it was honestly purely secular arguments, what I saw from biologists, other clinicians. But I think even now, my faith tells me that every human being is valuable and worthy of dignity. But I would say that it's my almost like my understanding of science that really leads me to have this pro life belief. So it's not it's kind of like a blend of the two. I'm not sure how to like frame it, but again, just the interactions that I have with my patients, it's a combination of my pro life framework, but also understanding that they're made in the image of God, right? Just like
yeah,
every other patient, even if that day they're being particularly annoying, right? They are still worthy of patience. They are still worthy of compassion.
yeah. I can relate. When I was a teenager, I think there was a short phase when I was like, I'm personally pro life. Probably just because that's what I heard my peers saying at the time. But once I relearned why am I pro life as a Catholic, then that's when I went down this rabbit hole of listening to pro life apologetics and then decided,
Right.
okay, I'm not just personally, I'm 100% pro life. And yeah, I definitely agree that I've just really utilized and have like the secular arguments really have convinced me. And I
Mhm.
mean, I like to say, even if I did not grow up Catholic, even if I wasn't Catholic, even if I was atheist or some other flavor, I hope that I still would come to the same conclusion from
Yeah.
reason and science alone. I mean, we'll never know that alternate universe timeline,
Mhm.
but I feel like, yeah, I think it's my faith that drives me, but
Mhm.
that it's been the science and the secular arguments that
Exactly.
have convinced me.
Yeah. I think, I mean, Kristen Hawkins said it really well. She essentially said, "It's my faith that tells me every human life is valuable, but it's science, right, that tells us that human life begins at conception." And
Mm,
it's the same reason I would hope that, most people are against, murdering an innocent newborn,
yeah.
because science tells us that they're alive. And
Mhm.
it's no different for the preborn. But I think that we hear about, the hardening of hearts. And I think that unfortunately we are in a spiritual battle right now. And a lot of, we're starting to see the loss of faith, the loss of Christianity in this country, around the world. And I think that when that happens, you start to devalue the most vulnerable people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the deconstructing of
Mhm.
faith.
Yeah, exactly.
That's been another thing. So, are there any saints, scriptures, mentors who have been especially meaningful to you throughout your pro-life journey?
Yeah, so this might be cliche. My confirmation saint is Joan of Arc. So
Very cool.
in many ways I can relate to her, her work. And I think that at that time she faced a lot of pushback, not just from the people around her, but also from the church, oddly enough, right? She was burned at the stake and she was branded a heretic by the Catholic Church. And I think it's a sobering reminder that in many ways, sometimes we have to recognize the imperfections of the people who are in leadership of the church. And, being myself at a Catholic university, I have surprisingly faced a lot of the same drawbacks and hardships that I did in high school, right? Under a secular public school. And so I guess it's a reminder Joan of Arc, that our work, our commitment is to God and obviously to the church. But, we may have times where there may be leaders in the church that are not so receptive to our work, that may even oppose our work. But it is ultimately our obligation to follow the teachings of God in the church.
I heard this story of Joan of Arc that one time in battle, an arrow pierced her neck and she just pulled that arrow right out and kept fighting. And that's just such a powerful image to think of, life
Pretty
hits
badass.
you. I'm sorry?
I was saying it's pretty badass, right?
Yeah, so badass. Just the idea of life can
Mm,
hit you in different ways. The evil one can attack you, and sometimes you just gotta keep going, keep fighting.
exactly.
So, some practical advice. What advice could you give to young pro-life people who are maybe discerning whether or not nursing or healthcare is for them? What would you like them to know?
Yeah, I mean, I would say at the most basic, if you believe that each and every single patient is worthy of the right to life, compassion, dignity, I would say those should be the most basic qualifications to be a healthcare worker. Same applies. If you don't believe that the preborn have the right to life just on the arbitrary basis of their gestational development, you probably shouldn't be a healthcare worker because, again, I think we've overcomplicated it, right? In today's society of what it means to work in healthcare, to be compassionate. But I would encourage young people, if you have the heart for this mission, if you have the heart for serving the Lord in this ministry, then absolutely, like, we need, I wouldn't just say like you should, we need more people who have that worldview in mind to go into healthcare. Because if we allow the radical abortion lobby to continue to subvert and undermine what healthcare really is, then I worry for the next 50 years when I'm 85 years old and in my deathbed, is my nurse going to euthanize me? And same, I would worry for future generations that have a really twisted understanding of what healthcare really is.
Yeah. So, what skills or traits have served you well as both a future nurse and a pro life advocate? Maybe what are some skills or traits you think others should acquire?
Yeah, so I have seen from almost every pro life leader what you really need is drive, but also grit. And I think grit is probably,
It,
yeah, it's honestly, like, Melanie, this. We don't have all the money in the world, right? We're
yeah.
not in pro-choice America, so it is hard. It's not a glamorous life. There will be a lot of burnout that you will experience, but I would say that at the end of the day, it is worth it, because if God is with us, who can be against us? So grit, ambition, and recognizing that maybe despite every battle or every loss, there is another victory waiting just around the corner. So we
Yeah.
need we need more people like you.
Yeah. Our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities.
Amen.
Darkness. And we need more people to be light in the darkness, to be a voice for life in a culture of death. So hopefully God will continue to raise up more pro-life warriors. So how can listeners support or amplify the work of pro-life nurses, especially those in our own communities? And follow up to that, how can I find a pro-life nurse near me?
Yeah, really great question. So basically, shout out the word, right? Pass the word, we exist. Melanie, you said, before this, you probably didn't know we existed. So now
No?
you do. Yeah. So same for, for maybe you have a nurse or nursing assistant in your life who is pro-life. And maybe they're what I call the social media activists who, reshares the live action post, but maybe they want to get more involved.
Mm,
So they can go to nursesforlife.org and they can sign up for our membership. If you're a nursing student or a nurse practitioner student, membership is totally free. So there's no commitment. You just sign up, and we have like regular quarterly meetings that we do for members. Like I said, we do stuff in DC every so often. For the March for Life, actually coming up, we have our coffee social that we do every year. So
cool.
we'd love to see them there. And yeah, like even if you're not, again, you don't have to be a healthcare worker. You can just be an ally of our mission. You can donate, you can support, follow us. Yeah.
Very cool. So, looking ahead, what is your hope for the future of the pro-life movement in medicine specifically? Where do you think we're heading or need to head?
I think right now the future of the pro-life movement, the battle that we're going to be fighting for the next few decades, is really going to be in healthcare. It's going to be in medicine, it's going to be in nursing, especially with chemical abortion now accounting for the majority of abortions. I think that that percentage is only going to grow until we have health, like a vocal majority of healthcare workers that are starting to speak out against this. We're going to be having a lot of setbacks. I think for the future, in my perfect world, and in the I think the track that we're on now, which is great, is we're starting to mobilize these healthcare workers. We're starting to see a lot of the fruit of these, a lot of the fruit. But I would say, yeah, like nurses, CNAs, nurse practitioners, physicians, like going to their state legislatures, going to the media, and more importantly, like you said, having more inclusivity, more diversity in our movement, and not just saying your stereotypical 80-year-old white doctor in behind the camera, but also having maybe a 30-year-old female doctor, right, who's very passionate about this issue and who believes that the preborn are just as equal as any other patient.
If you had a magic wand, I would love to hear what you picture like the pro-life healthcare system looking like in 25, 50 years. Like abortion's abolished, it's off the table, you have the magic wand. Paint me the picture. I'd love to hear from your like, healthcare lens what that world could look like.
Yeah, I think again, at the most basic, we would have, I hope, standing a mutual understanding across every field that ending your preborn patient's life is immoral. And, also having that consistent life ethic, but also ensuring that the women who are in underserved communities, women who are facing an unexpected pregnancy, making sure that we're meeting them with the resources that they need. And, dare I say that we should make birth free.
Yes, we love free birth over here.
Yeah, but yeah, like I said, really, like there are just so many like practical things that I think most Americans, whether they are pro-life or not, that we should be able to agree on, right? Making sure that there is access to paid maternity and paternity leave for jobs, making sure that we have good healthcare insurance throughout the lifespan, making sure that our adoption system, our foster care system, making sure that they're accessible, that it doesn't cost you $30,000 just to adopt, because that is ridiculous. And again, there's so many things that we can do right now to make sure that that perfect world in 25 years actually comes to fruition. But it starts now, and we need people like you.
So, if you could change one thing in the medical system to better honor the dignity of life, what would that one thing be?
It's a really great question. If I was a lawmaker, I would honestly say that for elective abortions, like we need to start having birth or death certificates. We need to be consistent about it because we say, oh, there's the birth certificate. And I've heard that argument a lot. People say, oh, well, a fetus doesn't have a birth certificate, as if some kind of like legal document recognizes that there is life there. So I think that we need to start treating the preborn with the same compassion, the same dignity that we give to any other patient. And that starts by recognizing in the healthcare system that an abortion is ending a human life. So, absolutely, we should have death certificates for preborn children who are aborted.
Love to see that come to fruition.
Yeah, so if any lawmakers listening, we need that.
Okay, now I have some fun rapid fire questions for you. Are you ready, Felipe?
Let's hear it.
Okay, what's something about you most people would not guess?
Oh, really great question. Most people probably wouldn't guess. I used to play the piano and a couple of other instruments, so that's
Oh,
my hobby of mine.
very cool. Favorite way to decompress after a tough shift?
Oh my gosh. Well, I would normally say like watch a movie, but I just like literally take a nap and wake up like 5 hours later. So sleep.
Nice. Okay, if you could sit down with one historical figure over dinner, pro-life or not, who would it be? And why?
Yeah. I think it would be. Prime Minister Churchill, Winston Churchill, like I think in many ways, I mean, he was the leader of Britain during arguably the worst war that they've fought, and in many ways, I think that he is an icon of wisdom and strategy, and I think we could apply that to the pro life movement, not just like politically, but also like socially, how we change the culture.
Okay, pineapple on pizza or
Absolute yes, best pizza.
okay, I agree.
We're gonna have all
Well,
the comments saying no.
well, Felipe, I have one final question for you, and it is the question I'm asking all my guests. Since this is the Open to Life podcast, what words of encouragement can you give
Yeah.
to the young girl who finds herself in an unexpected pregnancy, or the young Catholic couple who is struggling with church teaching about contraception? What can you say to both of those people about encouraging them to be open to life?
Yeah, great question. I would say first and foremost, if you're facing an unexpected pregnancy, please know you're not alone. I know I'm sure it can feel so isolating, and you know that it's maybe for some people they might feel like their life is over. But I would say there are so many people, like Melanie and I, that we're ready to drop everything if it means helping you and your baby. And again, we have thousands of federally qualified health centers across the country. I think that's something that we should improve and grow even more. But there are resources. Abortion is not your only option. In addition to that, know the complications, know the documented risks that come with things like chemical abortion. And for other Catholics, especially who are struggling or dealing with contraceptive use right now, right? I would say that there are so many other alternatives that don't give you the ugly side effects that we're just now starting to see studies on, right? We have a lot of like physicians, clinicians that are now starting to basically advise their patients, like, hey, maybe it's not such a good idea because the long-term risk of cancer, that is something that you should know, and your OBGYN shouldn't be keeping that from you. You have the right to know the documented risks, but also natural family planning. Melanie, I know that's something that you're really outspoken on. And thankfully, we're starting to see OBGYNs actually apply this in their clinical practice as an alternative for contraceptives. So, my message to both would be, um, you know, we're here for you. There are options. You deserve to know the risks of both.
Totally. Yeah. I think if I had a magic wand, part of my future of the pro life healthcare system would
Yeah,
be having NFP, fertility
yeah,
awareness methods, at the forefront of conversations and root treatment, like through restorative reproductive medicine, with helping people to achieve pregnancy, and just that contraception will just be a thing of the past, and that people would want to live aligned with their bodies. Healthcare workers would affirm and encourage the use of natural family planning methods and not think it's your grandma's rhythm method.
yeah.
Yeah, the future someday. But here we are
I think it'll
today.
I think it'll get here a lot sooner than you think. Like I said, we're with these studies. I think a lot of clinicians are starting to finally wake up, and I think that's a positive sign of what the next 20-25 years brings.
Okay. So, Felipe, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Tell people where they can go to follow along with your pro life work.
Yeah. So once again, if you or someone you know are a nurse practitioner, CNA, they can go to nursesforlife.org and they can sign up for membership. Students join free. And if you're on social media, give us a follow at Pro Life Nurses across all platforms, and including TikTok.
Okay, very cool. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much, Felipe. I'm glad we were able to sit down and have this conversation, and you have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you for having me. You as well.